Hey everybody, welcome back to the Boston-Raleigh channel. We were watching Oversimplified History again. We watched this thing about like the when, the where, and the what with the Norman Conquest video that he did. Turns out that's a part of a Miniwars series that he's done, and we're gonna watch. That was number 3. We're gonna watch number 1, the Falkland War. I sort of know what this is.
Hi, English mariner John Strong. Hi, Anthony Carey, 5th Viscount of Falkland. I would very much like for you to go to Chile and locate the wreck of a Spanish treasure ship for me. Okay.
Bruh. Chile.
Hey, I found some islands.
Yeah. Isn't finding islands the best? We can't really do that very much anymore. We already found them all.
The English were probably not the first to discover the Falklands, but they were the first to write it down. They found it to be cold, wet, and miserable.
Just like
home. So they established a colony in 7...
Oh, the British, man, it's like, for any of you who know anything about the Pacific Northwest, especially the like Seattle, Washington State area, very wet, miserable, dreary. Watch the Twilight movie. And that's kind of what Britain is like, except for with more people. It's just the same kind of weather.
1765, unaware that the French had also discovered the islands and done the same a year earlier. And for a while, the two were unaware of each other's existence until presumably there was an awkward moment where they ran into each other. Then the Spanish showed up and told the French that a couple hundred years earlier, the Pope drew a line on a map and said all of this...
Whoa, so hold on. They both found the Falkland Islands, the English and the French both found them. And as I am aware, the Pope said that everything west of here is Portuguese. Or something. Hold on, wait.
Belongs to Portugal, and all of this belongs to
Spain. Yeah. So there's a line. There is a line somewhere, and they were fighting about it because supposedly Spain and Portugal get everything. But neither of them found the Falklands, so...
That the island was in Spain's territory, and they would like the French to hand over their settlement. Now, since the two were good friends, and Spain was willing to pay in cash money, the French obliged. But since they were still a little bitter about the recent 7 Years' War thing, they made sure to warn the Spanish not to let those dirty English on the other side of the island take over. So Spain went over to the English and explained, Pope, line on map, Spain's island. And the English said, yeah, right, this is our island.
Dude, the English... You're like, yo, the Pope told us we could have this, and then the British separatists, the vehement anti-Catholics, they're like, nah, this is our stuff now.
But the Spanish had more guns, so they kicked them off anyway. But then England threatened to go to war, so Spain...
Oh, imagine back in like the late 1700s when Spain was actually still a real empire. Spain is a nothing burger right now. In today's world, Spain is just a country with some people in it. There's not a whole lot of power going on in Spain. Military power, nothing like that. Nada.
Went to their friends in France and said, hey, it looks like stuff is about to go down. You in on this? And the French Minister of War said, yeah, and we'll launch a full-scale invasion of England and party like it's 1066. But then King Louis XV said, 1, you're insane, and 2, you're fired. Sorry, Spain, we're not ready for a war right now. So Spain had to give the English their settlement back, saying it's still our island, and the English said, no, it's our island. Then some colonists in North America got a bit rowdy, so the English had to leave their settlement to go focus on that, but they left behind a plaque that said this is totally still our island.
America.
So the island was in Spanish hands, but then a French guy, no, not that one, turned on the Spanish, took over most of the country, and captured King Ferdinand VII. And in response, the Spanish colonies in South America started vying for independence. So Spain had a little bit on its hands and also had to leave the islands. And for a couple decades, the islands were left uninhabited except for the penguins, some fishermen, and the gauchos, which are basically like cowboys but cooler and Spanisher. A merchant from Hamburg living in the now independent United Provinces of the Rio de la Plata heard about the feral cattle roaming the Falklands and thought it would be a good way to make some money. So he got permission from both Buenos Aires and the British government to set up trade there as a private venture. Some American ships came down and began hunting whales and seals around the islands, and Vernet wasn't too happy about it. So he asked Buenos Aires for some military assistance in defending the islands, but Buenos Aires said, meh, do it yourself, gave him some weapons, and appointed him governor of the islands. So he seized the US ships and arrested their crews. In response, 2 things happened. First, America came down and said, nice settlement you have there. Would be a shame if someone destroyed it. And then they just
America, F yeah. Dude, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. I don't even know the logistics of all this. Although it is funny to look at Argentina and not see it as Argentina shaped. in the territory. So like Buenos Aires is still the capital and everything, but it's not full Argentina yet because Argentina now owns the Falklands. But somehow I knew America was going to be involved in a big way. I didn't really know, but I knew. It was in my soul.
Destroyed it. Second, Britain heard Rene had been appointed governor, meaning the United Provinces, actually now the Argentine Confederation, were officially claiming the islands as theirs. So Britain showed up and said, hey, didn't you see our plaque? And since they had more guns, they kicked them off the island. And the Falklands remained firmly in British hands for the next century. They officially became a crown colony in 1840. Port Stanley became the island's capital in 1845. The cattle hides from the island weren't worth much, so they imported sheep from Britain in 1851. 2 world wars came and went, and all this time, the Argentinians never rescinded.
It's kind of wild, actually, because cows are way more valuable than sheep because we have refrigerators, and you can put the meat on a boat with the fridge. Some ice. You can put it on ice and send it somewhere. But it's like, no, we just can't sell cowhide. We're going to use wool, because wool doesn't go bad.
Their claim over the islands. Now it's 1976, and after a couple civil wars, a new brutal military dictatorship sponsored by the U.S. fight against communism has taken control in Argentina. And by 1981, this guy was in power. The economy had been struggling for a long time.
By the way, we did a flash forward real quick. Went from like the 17, 18... Oh, wait, we're in like the late 1900s, 50 years ago. Okay.
And Galtieri had been unable to improve the situation. Now, if you ever find yourself the brutal military leader of a struggling South American country and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout the centuries. Start a war to distract everyone from their misery.
Yay!
Galtieri knew how popular he would be if he could finally take back Argentina's last Malvinas from the occupying British. There had been proposals to cut British military spending, and the ice patrol vessel HMS Endurance had been withdrawn from the area. So the Argentinians assumed the British may not even bother doing anything about the invasion. After easily capturing the largely uninhabited South Georgia island, 600 Argentine troops were sent to the Falklands. The small number of Royal Marines and other British forces stationed there put up a small amount of resistance, but in the end had to surrender to the larger Argentine force. Crowds in Argentina celebrated the news, but they were wrong to assume the British would do nothing, because the person in charge of the United Kingdom at the time was this lady.
Oh, they're cooked. It's Margaret Thatcher. See, I do remember a little bit of this, is that her political career, that was sort of a speed bump in it.
Thatcher was a somewhat controversial prime minister, but whether you loved her or hated her, there was no denying that she was tough.
Like Iron Lady.
Iron, for example. She immediately declared an exclusion zone around the islands and organized for a task force of over 100 ships to set sail for the Falklands. The United Nations expressed concern at the Argentine invasion. All South American nations apart from Chile backed Argentina. And since the United States had propped up the Argentine dictatorship,
Bro, Chile over here not being loyal.
Went to Thatcher and said, could you maybe just let them have the islands? And Thatcher said no. Okay, here, have some weapons. Fighting a war over 8,000 miles from home was a logistical challenge.
Imagine Reagan trying to appease someone. That's the kind of person Margaret Thatcher was. She was a worthy adversary and respectable opponent, unlike pretty much anyone else who's ever led Britain in my lifetime, or even in basically since Churchill. She's just the best.
For the British. They requisitioned civilian cruise ships and containers, and they used British-owned Ascension Island as a forward base. By the time they arrived at the Falklands in May, the Argentine forces had had time to entrench themselves. The first task for the British was to gain control of the seas, which they did easily. On the 2nd of May, a British submarine sank an Argentine cruiser. The sinking was controversial, as it occurred outside the British exclusion zone. It was also the largest loss of life in a single incident during the war. And in response, the Argentine Navy withdrew from the island.
Small.
The next task for the British was to gain air superiority. While the Argentine Air Force controlled the skies, they were able to inflict considerable damage on the Royal Navy below. Days after the sinking of the General Belgrano, 2 Argentine super-étendards carried out a raid on the HMS Sheffield and sank it with an Exocet missile. For weeks, the Argentine Air Force would continue to carry out raids and inflict heavy casualties on the Royal Navy, with British Sea Harriers doing their best to take out as many of the Argentine aircraft as they could. While
for military reference, air superiority is probably currently one of the most important aspects of war.
Battle in the skies raged on. San Carlos was chosen as the best landing site for the British ground forces. An SAS raid took out Argentine defenses on Pebble Island, and the HMS Alacrity sailed through Falkland Sound to flush out any Argentine supply ships. The landings began on May 21st, with Argentine aircraft carrying out full-scale raids on the task force ships taking part in the landing, damaging...
This is just a really expensive way to take these islands back. Like, it's just not as, it's not as optimal to be trying to maintain beachheads or do sea warfare against planes. That's usually not what you want to do.
Several, and sinking a few, but anti-aircraft cannons and sea harriers...
Well, I should be specific. Sea warfare near islands where the planes have their own stations and everything. That's why we have aircraft carriers.
Carriers shot down many of the aircraft in what became a major turning point for air superiority, and a beachhead was successfully formed. Then
There
the
you
ground
go.
troops began their movements out of San Carlos, across the north towards Stanley, and south toward the Argentine stronghold at Goose Green. In the following battles, a clear trend emerged. The Argentine conscripts put up a good fight, and with the rough, muddy terrain, the war was by no means easy for the British. But with highly skilled Royal Marine commanders and parachute regiment troops, the British would often find themselves taking on larger numbers of Argentinian soldiers, but would still come out victorious with minimal casualties. The 14-hour-long
Crazy.
battle for Goose Green commenced on the night of May 28th. The battle ended in a decisive British victory, with over 900 Argentinians surrendering. Then, with 5,000 reinforcements arriving from the 5th Infantry Brigade, the British started preparing for their final assault on Stanley. In a series of hard-fought battles, they took control of the hills and mountains surrounding the town, as the Argentine forces withdrew, with British ships shelling their positions from offshore. Utterly surrounded, on the 14th of June, the Argentinians surrendered, and the war was over. The 2-month-long war claimed hundreds of lives and left the island strewn
So
with
let's break this down a little bit. Lot of British casualties in terms of injured, but very few killed overall. The total casualty numbers, Argentinians had like more than double in all regards, in injured, in killed especially. Those are pretty bad numbers for Argentina, especially with the fact that you had superiority. Air superiority was something the British had to sort of overcome. And that's kind of insane. Beachhead's not always the best way to do war. It's sometimes necessary, but you have planes zooming around you. You got boats. The planes will shoot your boats. The planes have somewhere to go, right? There's no need for aircraft carriers if you have an island to restock your planes at. And so it just seems to me like the British really outperformed the Argentinians. And at this point in history, I would have said I liked the British more. But that would definitely not be the case anymore. They're never proud of themselves. They always hate themselves. Much worse than we do here in America. And Argentina's been very afuera as of recently, and that appeals to me. So,
minefields that still pose a problem to this day.
I'd be fine with Argentina
recapturing
recapturing
but in
their
2013 a referendum was held, and the islanders voted 99.8% in favor of remaining British. Plus, oil was just found near the islands, so the British probably aren't going to give them up anytime soon.
No. All right. So that was a mini war. That was literally like what, 10, 12 minutes. Let's do another one real quick. All right, next one we're gonna do a football war. This one's even shorter, and I have no idea what this is about except for South American countries, like ones I can't remember off the top of my head because they're not that important to me.
Quick, you have 2 seconds to name these 2 countries.
Oh God. One of them is no. One of them is Costa Rica, I think. Costa Rica, and I mean, I guess I could say El Salvador, but I feel like El Salvador is the little brown one that's a little higher up.
You're wrong, unless you got it right. Then good job. They are, of course, Honduras and El Salvador.
Ah, it's Honduras and El Salvador. I'm a dingus. All right. I was half right. This is why I was like, I swear I didn't tee this up, but I'm like, yeah, I barely know what these countries even are, really. I mean, the only ones that I'm familiar with are stories I've heard from people who've gone to places like Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. And aside from Panama, because of its strategic importance, everything below Mexico and that little trail, it just doesn't, like, I don't think about it,
Salvador. One thing these 2 countries have in common is being fanatic
They
about
play
football.
soccer.
Or if you're a freedom-loving patriot, soccer.
Yeah!
If they love it so much they would go to war over it, you bet they would, and that is no bueno.
Not bueno at all.
If you look at these 2 countries, you might notice one major difference, and that is that this one is a lot bigger than this one. However, this one had a larger population than this one.
That
Made
makes
up mostly
sense.
of farmers, and there wasn't enough land for them to live and work on. So they started moving from El Salvador to Honduras in search of land. And by the 1960s, a huge
Migration problems? I couldn't have predicted that.
number of illegal immigrants had crossed over the border from El Salvador.
Oofy.
Meanwhile, in Honduras, it's 1963, and this guy has just staged a military coup to prevent the rise of communism and is now the military leader of the country. He immediately began harassing the peasants' unions and other left-wing groups, but he's a little insecure about the legitimacy of his leadership. So he holds an election and wins, but then the opposing party says, hey man, that election was clearly corrupt and fraudulent, and also you've been bribed by the rich American banana companies who are taking all of our bananas tax-free.
The rich American
and now our
banana
economy is in
companies.
ruins.
Is this where they got the term Banana Republic?
and everyone started to get mad at him. Now, if you ever find yourself the barely legitimate military leader of a corrupt Central American country, and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout
Start
the
a war?
centuries. Blame something else.
Oh,
So he
okay.
blamed the Salvadoran immigrants for stealing all the land and all the jobs and ruining Honduras. The immigrants found themselves under attack by the hostile locals. Egged on by the rich American banana companies who wanted all the bananas to themselves, the Honduran government began evicting Salvadoran immigrants who had been living on the land for generations
Right.
and started sending them back to El Salvador. The Salvadoran elite were furious and protested, citing moral reasons, but in
So in my general take on this is, if there's been multiple generations of people, but they were never supposed to be there in the first place, you're kind of at a conundrum. You have a conundrum here, because you don't really, you have people who don't really, like, they're not even from the country, but then you have some of these people that are just from the country. And so I think that more often than not, you just have to say that, like, look, the country that you're in is going to be able to make determinations like that.
reality, they were
If they want to send you back, send you back.
just getting a little too crowded. So tensions were about as high as they could be, but then
Oh, that's going to be crazy. See, we just had a hockey game in America and Canada. We've been a little bit angsty with each other recently. But Canada was very not happy, and also the left in America was not happy when Canada lost that game. They were not happy when the governor of Maryland said the least controversial thing is, like, "Yay, America, never vote for you again." Like, there's a lot of animus around sporting events when it's this kind of thing. If it's like an international game, sometimes it can be a little crazy.
it's the 1970 World Cup qualifiers, and both countries
Yep.
finished top of their qualifying tables, so it was now time for them to play against each other in
Ooh.
a series of matches. The first match took place in Honduras. The night before the game, Hondurans gathered outside the Salvadoran team's hotel, making noise and taunting them. The next day, Honduras defeated the exhausted Salvadorans with a late
Right.
90th minute goal. After the match, a young Salvadoran fan, unable to bear her country's defeat, shot herself. Disturbingly, the Salvadoran government glorified the incident and made her into a national hero.
That's really retarded. This is bad. You don't. It's just a game. I know it. I know it means other things, but it's just a game. Like, this is what happened with Canada too. At least the jokes online have been, yes, the country that is known for self-euthanasia, like, medically, not just trying to be fancy here and say that, but like a medical physician-assisted suicide. That's what that's about.
And at the next game, fans brought pictures of her to the stadium. Emotions were running high
That's
as
kinda
the next
wild.
match took place in El Salvador, and this time the tables were turned. The Hondurans had to endure a sleepless night in their hotel, and
Yeah.
the next day, before the match started, instead of the Honduran flag, the Salvadorans raised a dirty rag. So great
Oh,
job
man.
at reducing tensions. El Salvador won decisively over the exhausted Hondurans. While spectators battled in the stands, Team Honduras fled home in a bulletproof bus with rocks being thrown at them, and the Honduran coach reportedly told
Maybe I'm not that understanding of how soccer works, but 0-3 and 0-1 seem like, well, at least 0-1 seems like a close game. It seems like a defensive struggle to me, because if an entire soccer game you only end up kicking a couple goals, defense be strong, especially if they're tired.
told his players that they were lucky they lost. In response
Even
to
if
the
they
defeat,
lose.
Hondurans began terrorizing the Salvadoran settlers even more, in some cases reportedly throwing them off their land and burning down their homes, and the immigrants began fleeing back to El Salvador. The final game in Mexico would decide who went to the World Cup. It was close, but El Salvador came out victorious, knocking Honduras out of the tournament. The atmosphere is riotous, literally, and back in Honduras, attacks on the Salvadoran immigrants further increased. This was too much for El Salvador to
wild.
bear, with its people under attack.
These people, by the way, are completely ethnically identical, effectively speaking. Like, I know there's someone in chat who will actually me, but it's just national tension. It's similar to the way you would see Canada and the United States. Again, it's very relevant because Canada and the US, ethnically speaking, northern states, like the Canada border states and the Canadian provinces, they're very similar. There is not a whole lot of major differences. And one of these countries has a national identity, and the other one has a national identity of hockey and maple syrup, except we took away the hockey. So, it's time to get drunk on maple syrup, I guess. I don't know.
And an unmanageable refugee crisis on its hands, El Salvador severed all diplomatic ties with Honduras and declared war.
Yep. That'll
the Football
happen.
War is also known as the 100 Hours War because that's how long it lasted, making it one of the shortest wars in history. El
Wow.
Salvador started by carrying out air raids on strategic locations within Honduras, including Toncontin International Airport.
See, you usually would only call that an incident at that point if it's only 100 hours. It's what, like not even 5 days, 4 days and 4 hours.
Which prevented the Honduran Air Force from getting into the sky. Then, with their superior army, they began an invasion along 2 major roads, complete with light tanks and infantry.
Right.
Their advance was rapid, and they were quickly approaching the Honduran capital. Then, the Organization of American States met in a bit of a panic and unanimously agreed that war between El Salvador and Honduras was a bad thing and probably shouldn't continue.
Probably
so they
not.
went to El Salvador and said, "Can you please stop invading?" And El Salvador declared, "Not until they stop being jerks," and so the war went on.
Day
The
3.
Honduran Air Force finally got into the sky, and with aid from neighboring Nicaragua, they successfully carried out air raids on Salvadoran air bases and oil facilities, crippling the Salvadoran supply line and stopping their advance dead. Caught in a bit of a stalemate, the situation was no longer advantageous to El Salvador, so when the Organization of American States once again asked them to stop and agreed to ensure the safety of the Salvadoran immigrants, El Salvador relented, and a ceasefire was organized on the 18th of July. Then the OAS said, "Can you now please withdraw your troops from Honduras? No, please, no, please, no, please, no. Do it or we'll sanction you."
Yeah, sanctions.
You know what?
Just for you? No.
I'll do it. So
Oh,
El Salvador
really?
pulled its troops out of Honduras on the 2nd of August.
Somehow I thought that was going to be a very funny. You know what? Just for you. Still no. I like his general humor vibes though. Just for you, I'll do it. Just for you. Just for you. I think that's funny. Sanctions suck if you're a tiny little nation that can't deal with it. So.
And with casualties in the thousands, the war was over.
That's actually
The
a lot.
economies of both-
Like, compared to the other wars, 6,000 killed and 15,000 injured? That's like 10 times worse than the other one that we just watched.
Nations were damaged by the war, and El Salvador didn't have the capability to take care of all the returning immigrants, a crisis that eventually helped cause a civil war. The war left behind land and border disputes, some of which are still a cause of tension to this day. El Salvador went on to play in the World Cup, but lost every match they played and didn't make it past the group stage. So in the end, nobody achieved anything, and there were no winners. Except for this guy.
I like America. American banana companies. I think that's actually funny because you would see that as a joke in most other situations, but these countries are not like Honduras and El Salvador are kind of nothing burgers. I mean they matter in their region, but like I said, I couldn't have named them. I used to have all of this memorized. I used to be able to draw a general, not very cartography based, but still generalized world map, and I could label every country and capital and make this little map thingy. And I couldn't San Salvador and Tegucigalpa, if you're interested in those. I just remember those, but I think this is a relevant one. Thank you, Oversimplified, for letting me react to this video you made probably like the better part of a decade ago. These are some of his older stuff, obviously, because they're really quick, they're really snappy. They still have the good humor though. I like reacting to Oversimplified. I want to see more stuff. I'll probably watch some stuff that I've already seen before too, just because I know, like, you know, the Emu War is the 4th one. I knew about these because of the Emu War. And that one is one of my favorite Oversimplified videos. I'll probably react to that at some point if you want to see me do that. If you want to see me do other things, let me know. Definitely be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. We'll be back on Monday. I know we had a week break, but we'll be back on Monday with more Epic History China. See you all again next time. Bye-bye.